You highlighted the fact that by transitioning out of Bagram, we left a well-defended base with thousands of troops to be able to support and defend a rearguard action in the face of what was known to be an insurgent Taliban force that any day could march on the capital. But instead, you and your team were part of, as you noted, just over 100 infantrymen and Marines defending an international airport under siege from all sides. In your testimony, you cited that the site selection team by U.S. State Department raised a personal comfort as a consideration of whether to use Bagram. Could you please elaborate on that? Specifically, did State Department give the impression that they were reluctant to move embassy officials there because the space was, let's say, less comfortable at a military base like Bagram?
Sir, that's a correct indication, yes.
Is it your further belief that State Department made choices that were most convenient for State Department officials rather than mission essential items, evacuating U.S. personnel, the destruction of classified information and sensitive items going forward?
Sir, as I'm not privy to the decision-making process that occurred at the embassy, I cannot fully answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to just end with an appreciation for those who have served, including those who continue to serve. As so many on this committee have stood up to be able to stand in the breach with you, including our own team, Task Force Argo, that evacuated over 3,000 Americans and our allies by civilian airline with no help from the U.S. State Department. This after action is the only insight we have into what's happening. And while I praise you for being here, there are men far above your station that should be in this room justifying their actions today so they can never happen again. With that, Mr. Chair, I thank you and I cede my time back.
Thank you, Mr. Nunn, for your service. Thank you for your questions. I would just say right now, I see something happening that I've actually never seen here before. And it makes me proud. And it is, I have colleagues that are sitting down there with our service members and with Gold Star families, just to let them know that they're not sitting above them, they're not detached from them, but that they're with them. And they were part of the same fight and chewed the same dirt in a sense, and showing that connectivity. And honestly, I've never seen it before in my time in Congress, and it makes me proud to see that. I'll say that very, very truly. It makes me proud to see it. We have two more individuals, Mr. Van Orden, and then I have myself yet. But Mr. Van Orden, I yield you 5 minutes of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all you guys for being here. I appreciate it, Command Sergeant Major. Rock on, dude. Take care of the boys when you get overseas, and girls. I appreciate your efforts. My personal history with Afghanistan, I didn't get there until 2003 for my first tour. I held one of my friend's hands as he died in the old cache when it was at Kent. We had a satellite phone next to his ear, listening to his wife cry out to him and to God because she knew that she'd never see her husband alive again. When this started happening, I could not sleep. My wife told me just to go back to Afghanistan, so I linked up with one of the groups you referred to in your testimony, and I wound up in Abu Dhabi and Dubai processing people that civilians extracted with the help of a foreign government, because our government willfully and knowingly abandoned American citizens and our allies to terrorists. So I got a couple questions for you guys. Was there a written plan for this exfiltration? Colonel?
I did not see a written plan for the exfiltration for this specific mission.
Okay,
I am sure there were orders given, though.
Right, reading through here, you were planning you were building an airplane flight. Okay, we had X amount of years to figure this out. Everybody from the Biden administration says their hands were tied because of the Doha agreement, so they should have known that something was happening. And when I say the Biden administration, I mean Secretary Blinken, General Austin, now SecDef, and General Milley. They are all culpable in the deaths of all of these people because they are incapable of doing their jobs. Everybody, I'm a retired Navy SEAL. Sorry, I should have thrown that out there. So I understand that NEOs are the purview of the State Department, and they waited so long to turn this NEO authority over to the DOD to activate it. They're responsible for all these people's deaths. That is a fact. Have any of you, in your vast military experience, ever heard of a plan where you would intentionally withdraw all the military forces that are protecting civilians out before you would pull the civilians out? Anybody?
No.
Colonel? Other colonel, rather?
The Douglas MacArthur said that every military disaster can be described in 2 words. Too late.
Very well. Command Sergeant Major?
No, sir.
Okay. Why did the Biden administration, in your opinion, Command Sergeant Major, I will not ask you this question, why, in your opinion, did the Biden administration continue to lie about the number of American citizens that they willfully abandoned to terrorists in Afghanistan?
I couldn't even begin to speculate.
Are you willing to accept the fact that the Biden administration kept moving the ball and lying about the amount of American citizens they abandoned to terrorists in Afghanistan, knowingly and willingly?
I'll say that the statements that came out from the administration did not match the facts that we were clearly seeing on the ground.
Okay, Colonel.
I was very troubled that I believe 90% of the evacuees were not people who had were not Afghans who had worked for the U.S. government or the U.S. military.
Getting there.
I've got interpreters who are still on the ground that we're trying to get their SIVs, trying to get them out. And the fact that this withdrawal often was the withdrawal of the well-connected and not the people who are SIV holders, I think deserves serious examination.
Very well. Thank you, Colonel. How many of our NATO allies that have been fighting this fight for a long time, since 2003 when the Lithuanians were trying to get into NATO, how many of our NATO allies wanted to follow this timeline and get out of Afghanistan on the arbitrary timeline that the Biden administration set? How many of our NATO allies wanted to go on that timeline? To the best of your knowledge, Colonel.
None that I know of.
Colonel?
I'm not privy to that.
Okay, I am. The answer is 0. Nobody wanted to leave from NATO. This has been a NATO fight for a very long period of time, and you guys didn't even address this. So this would have fractured NATO. It's unbelievably irresponsible that the Biden administration would completely blow off all of our NATO allies. None of them wanted to leave. And then everybody quotes that we'd have 2,500 U.S. forces in the country. That's not enough. That's not true. There would have been 10 to 12,000 forces, it would have been an MND again. So Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force that I was with, we would have had the same thing, CJTF 180, all the guys you're at 10th Mountain. It would have been the same type of thing. So they're lying. And here's the most important question I can ask anybody here. Who has been fired for this?
No one.
Colonel, to your knowledge?
No one that I know of.
Okay, so this is the most disgraceful thing that I can think of that the United States government has ever done in our entire history, and 0 people have been held accountable from the Biden administration. 0. Right? How about the military writ large? 0. Who was the ground force commander? What's he doing now? You guys know? Do you? Do you know who it was?
Yeah, Admiral Vasely, and then it was General Donahue. I will say, in their defense, they were given an impossible situation, and they showed extraordinary leadership when every single aspect of what was going on turned into total chaos for things that were outside of their control.
I get it. Senator Tom Cotton, when he was questioning General Milley, asked him one thing. He said, "Why have you not resigned yet?" And General Milley said he thought it would be a profoundly political statement. I wish that my friend Tom Cotton, who I respect gratefully, did one more follow-up question. General Milley, if intentionally abandoning American citizens and our allies to terrorists, many of them to certain death, is not worth making a political statement, what, in your estimation, General Milley, is? None of these people that are there, and we're giving them passes. I'm not. These general officers and flag officers should have resigned on the spot, gone on television, and said this is wrong. You know what that takes? That takes courage. We have so many things wrong with our military at the senior levels and in the Biden administration. It's embarrassing. These people, I'm calling for them to resign. General Milley should not have a retirement. He should not. General Austin should be, I don't know what the heck he should be doing, but he sure as hell should not be leading our military. He's a disgrace. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you allowing me to speak my piece here, and I yield back.
Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Van Orden. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes. I've heard a lot of things today. I appreciate every bit of what I've heard. I appreciate you all offering us your candor and your honesty. And I'd ask that you bear with me for a couple more minutes of questioning. I want to talk about the SIVs, the planning, the operations as we've done in large. When I think about planning, I think about you come up with an objective that you want to meet. And after you have an objective that you want, you come up with a strategy and tactics by which you think you're going to accomplish that objective. And then you do something really important. You practice it. So you can see what goes right and what goes wrong. How things play out when the metal hits the meat, as they say. Let me start with a broad question. Colonel Crumrick, to your knowledge, what level of practice took place? This is a very general question to the whole of the withdrawal. To your knowledge, what level of practice took place?
There was no time when the order was given to start withdrawing. When the announcement came out on the 14th of April, 1 May, we saw water rolling, basically being sucked down the drain from all those outstations in Afghanistan. We're coming back to do an extraordinarily difficult task. There was no time to be able to go through a full rehearsal. It had to happen now.
So let me ask some of the specifics on this. Was it then not practiced if a suicide bomber, a person, a vehicle-borne IED, something else, went off at one of the access points?
Units have that already baked into what they do for their battle drills, for their standing operating procedures. One of the reasons the speed was so important with the withdrawal from a planning perspective was to try to limit the exposure area for our service members that would be, frankly, vulnerable during the time period of withdrawal.
The reason I ask about practice for that, Sergeant Major, you brought up that you were looking at the level of services that were available at Bagram versus HKIA. And you mentioned that the level of service there was maybe a level 2 hospital. In your opinion, did it matter that it was a level 2 medical facility and not a level 3 medical facility?
Sir, if one of my soldiers were to get wounded, I would want a level 3 there.
Why?
For the greater life-saving ability.
Let me ask some more planning and practice questions. Was it ever practiced that there would be thousands evacuated on civilian flights that pulled cash out of their wallets and flew halfway around the world to get people out of what was effectively still a standing war zone? Colonel Crumrick.
No.
Was it practiced that an airfield could be overrun by 1,000 people?
No, not in this situation.
To anybody's knowledge? Or overrun by 10,000 people?
Sir, I can speak on the behalf of Bagram. That was practiced on Bagram. That was a scenario that was exercised continually.
And you offered analysis based on you practiced this at Bagram, but what with HKIA?
So
I don't know.
I am not privy to what happened at HKIA. I was not there, but I can say that these contingencies were very well rehearsed and planned for in Bagram.
How many airstrips at Bagram? How many runways?
There are 2 main runways that you can take off from that I am aware of.
Was it practiced that they may be down to 1 runway at HKIA? I don't know that it was. There's a lot of these questions that we can ask about what was practiced, what was planned for, what was prepared for. And as I think about the hundreds of those that I can ask, largely the answer comes back to it wasn't thought about, whether it was because there wasn't given the time to think about it, or if somebody thought about it, somebody didn't want to hear about it. Maybe they wanted a plausible deniability. I won't pretend to put myself into somebody else's mind. But there was a willful ignorance that took place with this withdrawal. Cost the lives of service members. It looked like you had a comment on that before I finish up. I'm happy to hear you out, Mr. Cromer, or Mr. Colonel. I thought I saw your heads go up. You know, it appeared to me as though there was a willful ignorance. I think the facts bear that out. And I can't say anything more than what my colleagues have already said on this, other than that it cost unnecessarily the lives of our service members, and it leaves those that are still serving and those that are still mourning with the question of what has changed. And I can't come away after several hours of questioning with you all and tell them this is what has changed. This is who learned the lesson and who would say, yes, I would absolutely do that differently. And that's not what I want to be left with. That's all I can say on that for now. In that, I'm going to, oh, we did have somebody else join us. Very good. Mr. Banks, I recognize you for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman for holding this hearing. It's so important, and to this point, no one has yet been held accountable for the disastrous, deadly, embarrassing withdrawal from Afghanistan. In fact, last year, General Frank McKenzie, then retired general in charge of CENTCOM, said he himself had many regrets about what happened in Afghanistan. In March of this year, I asked Secretary Austin before the House Armed Services Committee, sir, do you have any regrets? General McKenzie has regrets. General Austin, Secretary of Defense for the United States of America, overseeing this withdrawal, do you have any regrets? He said, I have no regrets. And I wonder from each of you, how does that make you feel when you hear the top leader of our Pentagon, of our military, say he has no regrets about what happened in Afghanistan? Colonel, we'll start with you.
Extremely frustrated and let down.
You know, I lost 6 soldiers from my unit in Afghanistan in 2007, and the fact that there has not been a examination of why these failures, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan, why these failures keep happening, is very frustrating to me, because it seems that the next time we get into one of these interventions, we're going to make the same basic mistakes, and it's going to heighten the risk of another disaster, and that I find unacceptable.
Sir, this is my current leadership, and I am not in a position to speak on the matter of this question.
Understood. Hopefully one day you'll be able to tell us what you really think. Colonel, respond to Secretary Austin, though. I mean, the arrogance to say that. I mean, the families behind you who lost loved ones, the heroes that we lost that deadly day and other deadly days in Afghanistan, to say that you have no regrets. I mean, to me, it was as a veteran of the war in Afghanistan who served with others, heroes that we lost, to say I have no regrets. I mean, respond to that, Colonel.
All combat veterans have regrets. You know, I've been very fortunate where the VA has been able to help me, and I've got a support team that helps me work through that every day. But I find that comment tone deaf and not tethered to reality. You have to have regrets. You should. It looks like September 10th, 2001 there now. It's only getting worse. There's nothing but regret and pain and struggle there. So I find that statement to be wildly painful for everyone who's had to put in blood, sweat, and tears, for the families that lost their family members. I mean, it's got me absolutely livid. I don't know what I would say to him, but I strongly disagree on every level.
Yeah. Can you unpack more about what happened leading up to the withdrawal? There's been a lot of discussion today about the decision to close down Bagram and rely on the very public airport in Kabul to withdrawal. But can you tell us more about for General Austin, who led troops in Afghanistan, and say he has no regrets? Can you talk more about that decision to close down Bagram that led to the devastation that happened in Kabul? How could he say he has no regrets when obviously those were terrible decisions that were made?
I can't speak for Secretary Austin. I can explain why that happened from a planner's perspective, because this idea and this concept that we would be able to run this diplomatic island in perpetuity in Kabul was something that the administration decided that's what was going to happen. And they forgot that the enemy gets a vote and that they wished away a lot of these other issues that clearly came to pass. That everybody was warning, not just the military leadership, but also the interagency and the intelligence community was just telegraphing this every day. I find it, I just cannot figure out the decision making. I know why they picked HKIA, because it was close to the embassy, and they just fell in love with their plan.
You know, I spent a lot of time in both places, Bagram and the North Kaya, throughout Kabul. It's a decision that will never make sense to me, and I hope one day we can unpack it more. I want to finish with one quick question. My time is almost expired. Representative Mills dug into this question. President Trump led us down a path to withdraw from Afghanistan, but to keep a light footprint of special operation forces there in place. And I wonder, Colonel, if we would have adopted that plan, that course of action, would those lives likely have been saved that day?
Speaking as a retired Green Beret myself, I have no doubt in my mind that if we had Green Berets, SEALs, Air Force Special Operations, MARSOC out, holding the picket line with our Afghan, especially the Afghan SOF that were there, we would have stood a much, much greater chance to build time and space to work on all the things that needed to be worked on in Kabul.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. To the families who are here, I will spend the rest of my time in Congress fighting for accountability for those who made this ridiculous and stupid decisions that led to the loss of your loved ones. I promise you that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.